Truffles rank among the world's most prized delicacies. Taiwan imports 200 tons each year, but the price tag is prohibitive for average diners. Today we meet researchers who want to build a domestic truffle industry to make the treat more accessible. Over the past 10 years, they've found 7 native species across Taiwan, including where they'd least expect. Through trial and error, they've created novel techniques for propagating these species in hopes of supporting mass production. Tonight in our Sunday special report, follow our camera as we join their search for made-in-Taiwan truffles.
一个鲔鱼松露炒饭，一个松满猪，一个鸡汤，一个龙虾炒饭。
It's a slow weekday afternoon, but this Michelin-starred restaurant is still full of guests. This summer, the restaurant unveiled a new dish, luxury fried rice. White rice is fired up in a wok with truffle oil and truffle sauce, and then topped with bluefin tuna. Generous shavings of truffle provide the finishing touch.
Fresh truffle is sliced into thin pieces. Why serve the shavings on top of a hot dish? Because heat takes the aroma of the truffles to another level.
Truffles have a rich and complex flavor that's hard to describe. 1 kilogram costs 10 to hundreds of thousands of new Taiwan dollars, making them an ingredient to be cherished. They are known as diamonds of the kitchen.
以高档食材的话，法式食材3个最昂贵的食材。
As for high-end ingredients, the 3 most expensive ingredients in French cuisine are foie gras, caviar, and truffle. Actually, only truffle is considered a natural product. The other 2 are produced by husbandry or they're produced by human cultivation.
Taiwan imports some 200 tons of truffles each year, but there are some who hope to mass-produce truffles domestically to make the delicacy more widely available. Here in this Taidong forest, we follow researcher Lin Jielong down a bumpy road. We're off to dig for truffles. For nearly a decade now, the Taiwan Forestry Research Institute has been on a hunt for truffles. They've developed techniques for cultivation in hopes of achieving mass production.
Slightly clear away the humus, and if there are any truffles to be found, you'll see them 5 to 10 centimeters below the surface.
Truffles are a type of fungus, just like shiitake, mushroom, and jelly ears. They grow symbiotically with the roots of Fagaceae tree species, which include the Japanese blue oak and Chinese chestnut. After ripening, the fruiting bodies break off on their own, looking like clods of soil. The truffle hunters disperse as they continue to dig. With the passing of time, conversation turns to silence as the disappointment of failure begins to weigh. Taiwan had high hopes decades ago for a commercial truffle industry. In the late 1980s, National Taiwan University forestry professor Hu Hongdao created prime conditions for truffle farming inside an experimental forest.
他就花了8年时间就做整个生育基地的这个调整。
He spent 8 years adjusting the cultivation conditions and sorting out the land. Once he had done that, he took 2-year-old sterile seedlings and planted them. Then he planted from 1989 to 1997. He harvested a total of 20 kilograms of truffle, Taiwanese truffle.
But following this early success, insufficient manpower and funding hindered operations, and when news of the truffles began to spread, truffle hunters began to appear from all corners, spoiling the soil conditions. The truffle population gradually declined. It wasn't until 2013 that the Forestry Institute restarted its truffle project.
松露非常的珍贵，那我们也希望
Truffles are extremely precious. We also want to build an industry that allows us to fill our tables with our own truffles to eliminate the need for imported truffles. We want to collaborate with the Forestry Bureau to create a truffle industry that doesn't harm our national forests.
The first step to domestic truffle industry is identifying the right varieties to grow. but identifying them requires first uncovering them from the soil.
林试所一直在传承土壤的。
The Forestry Bureau has always carried out soil surveys. There are more than 6,800 soil data samples to date. But in reality, uncovering truffles takes more than soil data. You also need national vegetation data. We looked at some 300,000 vegetation data samples in the national database. We ran comparisons of that data. Fungus growth depends on temperature, humidity, altitude, and host plants. Based on these variables, we identify 10 potential truffle hotspots.
After analyzing growth conditions, researchers headed out to the potential sites to dig. They had long believed that truffles need alkaline soil and medium to high altitudes to grow, but they were wrong.
然后第二个就是我们是用温度来做。
The other thing is that we used temperature to calculate altitude, and we identified sites that were at an altitude of 1,400 meters or above. But then later, just by happenstance, we found truffles in Taidong's Taimali township, which is less than 400 meters above sea level.
In recent years, the Forestry Institute has found black truffles and white truffles across Taiwan. New species were announced in international journals. When cultivating truffle, what matters most is aroma, followed by factors like flavor and environment requirements. Based on these criteria, the Forestry Institute pinpointed promising species to cultivate. One is the black truffle species we dig up today in Taidong.
Hello， 挖到一个，有了，蛮大的呢。对，啊，第一次看到那么大颗，哇！耶！
After truffles are collected, the next step is cleaning at the Forestry Institute's lab. After that, each truffle's height and weight is recorded.
3.37.
Then a sample is sliced for a close look under a microscope.
通常都要切到就是0.1公分。
If the truffle spores are mature, they're ready for artificial propagation.
镜头里面有成熟跟不成熟的。
There are some mature ones and immature ones. The black ones with thick film are mature. The thin, transparent ones, or the relatively transparent ones, are immature.
我们这次运气蛮好的哦，整体看起来。
We're pretty lucky with these. Overall, the maturity rate is 70% to 80%, very suitable for our inoculation experiments.
Out in the wild, truffles become more aromatic as they mature. That attracts rodents, wild boars, and other animals who eat them and disperse their spores in feces. But propagation is less straightforward in a lab. The first challenge is breaking down the ascus walls without damaging the spores.
开始的时候我们也不知道，所以我们的目标是把
We didn't know how to go about it initially. Our goal was to break the ascus walls while preserving the integrity of the spore particles. So we experimented. We would smash for a while, then have a look and evaluate.
This machine that looks like a juice blender is used to turn truffles into a liquid called spore suspension. The technique was developed through trial and error. Once the fluid is ready, it's used to inoculate the roots of 2 to 3-year-old saplings.
然后成熟的话就是每一
If the truffles are mature, we weigh them. For example, this one is 56 grams. After the 56 grams are turned into a spore suspension, 56 saplings are inoculated, 1 gram per sapling.
主要就是把这个悬浮液均匀的。
The main thing is to pour the suspension evenly over the root system so that there's a good chance of successful inoculation.
If inoculation is successful, the saplings will be moved out into nature to a site with favorable weather and soil conditions. If all goes well, truffles will start to appear in 6 to 8 years, and then they can be harvested each year. Black truffles tend to be cultivated using spore suspension, but white truffles are more suited to a different method.
就是所有东西进去操作台都要确定是无菌的，那手部要消毒，工具要经过热处理，这样子。
Researchers first cultivate the truffle's mycelium in a petri dish before inoculating saplings.
孢子悬浮液接的时候，它形成菌根的时候，可能要
After inoculation with the spore suspension, it can take 4 to 6 months before we can detect the presence of truffle mycorrhizae. But if you use mycelium, you can detect it as soon as 2 to 3 months. If you use mycelium, mycorrhizae might form as soon as contact is made with the root. At first, it's a parasitic relationship, and then it becomes symbiotic.
到目前为止，我们发现的新种呢，
As for new species, so far we've discovered a record-setting 7 new species, and we've transferred 6 technologies related to truffle cultivation. We hope to build an industry chain. I believe that Taiwan is moving closer and closer to this goal.
In forests nationwide, there are some 21 native truffle species tucked away, waiting to be uncovered. Researchers hope that in the not-too-distant future, Taiwan's truffle farming will take root so that more diners can experience this unique local treasure.